Hundreds more undocumented immigrants, many of them women and children, arrived this weekend by plane in San Diego and by bus in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Their fate is still uncertain as the government scrambles to house and process the sudden influx of illegal border crossers.
Take one quick peek at just the headlines directing your attention to the border and immigration issue. Here's what you see. Border breakdown. Obama either inept or doesn't care. Mothers crossing at an alarming rate. Two-time illegal immigrant charged with rape in Sanctuary City. And that's just at first glance. This country is in a crisis, and the look for leadership and real action is leaving many people on every side of the issue thinking there is simply no one awake at the switch. Doesn't make what side you're on. Doesn't make a difference. Let's welcome into MidPoint, specialist in cyber and Homeland Security policy for the Heritage Foundation, David Inserra joins us today. David, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
There's the first question, David, and I'm going to hit you right between the eyes with it. Who's asleep at the switch here and who's running things? Because we're hearing the governors being blamed for not doing things. We're hearing the lawmakers being blamed in not taking action that could take months or years. So who is asleep at the switch here?
You know, I really think that the Obama administration is asleep at the switch here. We're looking at an administration which is not interested in enforcing our laws, and even in his announcement last week, President Obama announced that he was going to go it alone. He was going to use more executive action, more authority in DHS to enforce the laws in different ways, in ways that make less sense, especially when you consider what's going on at the border right now.
Okay, but I'm going to play devil's advocate here again, all right? If you have a president of any stripe who is sitting in office right now, who has a Congress, who has lawmakers, who are going back and forth and can't seem to decide something to do, where it is complete gridlock, doesn't it behoove him or her to take some kind of action, to do something to snap this logjam?
Certainly, and if President Obama was willing to undo some of his own policies, I think we would see action. I think the problem is that President Obama wants to go further in the other direction. He wants to enforce the laws less and less. So we've got a crisis at the border, but his solution seems to be to do less rather than more.
Okay, why then go in the other direction?
Well, I think that we really need to go and enforce laws more because it sends a message. It sets a precedent. Right now, when we're not enforcing our laws, it begets more illegal immigration. People down in Central America are hearing the message loud and clear that if you can come, be allowed to stay. And that's what we're seeing right now on the border. So by stopping illegal immigration, sending a clear message that it will not be tolerated and you will be deported, that's the most effective way to stop future illegal immigration.
David, what you're saying is true to the ears of many. We have heard this from a lot of folks. We're hearing this now for 2 weeks. What I think people want to hear as we continue to ask people like yourself and experts is what can be done right now? We have the president asking Congress for $2 billion, and there's a lot of people wondering where that money is coming from and where it's going to go. $2 billion in order to care for this problem right now. They want to know, first, before the money, why are the governors not taking any action? Why are the governors of Texas and California and Arizona and the border states not taking action immediately to do something and at least try to stem the tide, or at least help to care for these like Marietta? Their feeling is they're being overrun.
Yeah, no, it's certainly the case, and I think you are. Yeah, no, it's certainly the case, and I think you are seeing some action. States are trying, Texas and Arizona especially. I mean, you saw Arizona pass its immigration law several years ago, only to be challenged in federal court. So it's not the states aren't trying; they are trying, which is that in many cases there's no substitute for federal action. Only the federal officers can initiate deportation proceedings and can completely, bring together all elements of society to protect the border. So really, we need the federal government to do more, and that means that we are going to have to look for ways to do things more effectively and efficiently.
David, is $2 billion going to help do something to stem this tide, or is this simply another politician throwing money at a problem without digging to the root of the issue?
I think it's probably the latter there. $2 billion is, we might need some more money to deal with the issue, but really it's how you spend the money, not necessarily just the amount of money you have. Right now, we're using the existing monies we have. We're using them to not enforce the law very well. President Obama we've got extra funding for Customs and Border Protection and ICE, but yet ICE doesn't enforce the law on many illegal immigrants because they're simply not viewed as priorities by this administration. So it's more how you use it, not necessarily how much funding you have.
And this is always seems to be a linchpin here. The last guest that we had on, we talked a little bit about it, Robert Luton from the San Diegans for Secure Borders Coalition, and we talked about this action. Even he said the same thing. Things need to be done. We need to get Congress to do something. But is it not fair to say that whatever you do right now is going to take weeks, months, and years? So whatever action any elected official takes right now, unless it is executive action or some sort of, and I hate to use the phrase, but some sort of pen going to paper, that it simply will not make this problem go away. You are still going to have citizens of communities that are going to feel they're overrun, and you're still going to have immigrants pouring across the border and being put in temporary facilities, and the possibility of all sorts of crime going on at these temporary facilities.
It's, what you're saying is exactly right. We don't have many good immediate solutions. The best we can do right now is to probably take more action in the way of sending the long-term message. What can we do to stop the future flows of illegal immigrants? And the best way to do that is to send a clear message to them. Get rid of these executive actions like enforcement priorities and deferred action for childhood arrivals. These are only encouraging more illegal immigration. What we can do right now, though, is we can look at ways in which we can expedite the removal of these individuals, and maybe that is an area where hopefully one would hope that Republicans and Democrats can come together to solve this problem.
All right, now let's look at the humanitarian side of this, because it doesn't make a difference who you speak to. You will always hear somebody mention the fact that, in essence, we still have families, we still have young children at the core coming across the border right now and being put into temporary facilities. If you talk to the people who watch some of the different protests, for instance, in Murrieta, California, you will hear people who will say how terrible it is. Do they not understand the humanitarian side of this? Do they have no human compassion? All right, now, from the perspective of you watching this, how do you answer that then? Because it seems as if there is anger, there is tremendous anger that is being pointed at these people who are looking for a better life, a better place to live, and there is no humanitarian side of America. This is the concept that some people are coming away from as they watch this video.
Sure. Well, in response to the humanitarian sort of crisis, I would once again come back to what has the Obama administration done that's created this predicament, especially down in Latin America. We've been talking about our borders right now, but what about down in Latin America? What's pushing these people out of their homes? Well, part of that is that the United States has been a fickle partner. We've stepped back from providing security assistance and cooperating with these countries, and now when these countries are overrun with drug cartels and other criminal organizations which make the streets incredibly unsafe, when these countries are overrun with these criminal elements, the people flee, and that's largely because the United States has stepped back from leading and cooperating with these countries, and so we also, in many ways, we're also to blame for that.
What really, though, could America do when you're talking about sovereign governments? And again, we're talking here about, for instance, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, places like this. You're talking about gangs and rampant crime. What could America actually be doing other than basically taking over their police force and saying this is the way to do it?
Sure. Well, obviously they are sovereign nations, and we're not advocating any sort of military action or intervening directly. But what many of these nations want, in fact, they're begging us for it, is for cooperation with us and security assistance money. We already do foreign aid, but unfortunately we're spending a lot of that money on areas which aren't very effective. We need to be putting that money towards security. These nations are incredibly stable, have high levels of crime. The best use of that money would be to combat crime and transnational criminal organizations. But unfortunately, if anything, some in Congress and the Obama administration have curtailed that funding.
I have about a minute left here, and let me ask that with regard to all this money. You can send all the money to these countries, but you can't tell them how to spend it. It's almost like giving them cash and saying, here, use it. So in essence, aren't they really asking for more money and more money and more money, and we simply don't know how it's being spent, and it may not be spent properly at all? It's a waste.
We do have some control over the way that funding is spent, especially if we work through certain initiatives that allow us to focus just on security. Right now, what you're saying is more or less true. There is money that's being spent on development or food aid. So some of the money is being spent on those, and the effects, the results of that, that funding is much less clear. It's not as effective. It's not as an effective form of aid. So we do need to look at more specific forms of aid that enhance the security and our cooperation with these nations and their police forces. That way we can combat these criminal organizations and make these places safer and better places to live.
About 15 seconds. Do you fear we'll see violence at the border now as these groups all gather and the police get more?
But I know that immigration is a very passionate issue, and I just hope that cooler heads prevail. But we also allow Americans to use their right to speak their minds.
David Inserra from the Heritage Foundation, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll do it again.
Thank you.
All right, a lot of this discussion goes as we keep hearing that there are groups and there are vigilante groups and there are other groups showing up at the border right now, and perhaps they are not there for the altruistic reasons to become part of whatever this demonstration is. That can be dangerous. Next up, sheriffs at the border pushing back against the feds and a whole lot more from the pages of Newsmax.com.